Peace, everybody. Uh, Finna do this video. Some things I thought about yesterday. So, what's been going on in the news was the day trading app, the brokerage app, Robinhood, how they actually shut down their members from trading GameStop, AMC, and other stocks in order for the Wall Street bankers and the hedge funds to steal all of their money, billions of dollars, right? Because the individual small investors got together on Reddit and decided they was going to pump the stock up by the billions, right? So the reason I'm making this video is because I read a post on Instagram from a Black Power individual. He asked the question, how come black people can't get together and pump up a black startup company like they did GameStop, how the white people did the GameStop stock? And I have the answer to that question. That's the reason for the video. The reason so-called black people can't come together to invest as one individual person or come together and invest as a group is because the black community doesn't exist. In order to have a community, you must have infrastructure. And infrastructure is everything a community needs to function. You know, the buildings, the streets, the roads, the water systems, the electrical grid, the gas, everything, the businesses, the stores. Now, in order for people to have infrastructure, they must be a community. Or they could just somehow stumble across infrastructure, because infrastructure can be both man-made and also you have natural infrastructure. You have rivers, you have like forests, trees, caves, and a person can make that infrastructure their home. But it takes a group of people to collectively come together and cooperate in order to make a community successful and also to even be a community. But how so-called black people in America are today positioned, a lot of blacks are forced into these communities by the government due to poverty. You know, you have single mothers. The phenomenon came around in the 70s, who actually was given public housing, and it was piled to these public housing complexes with more poor individuals with low income, who wasn't really responsible for paying rent and whatnot, you know, the regular rent rate. So they didn't really have money, they didn't have responsibility, they wasn't really required to actually save anything. So you have a community of poverty, and this community of poverty has spread. Not even just, I wouldn't even identify it just that. It's just one aspect, because not all of the communities were poor, but they had the same agenda. And the agenda was to get out the hood. But they was forced to get out the hood until the desegregation movement of the 1960s, the Civil Rights Act. You know, they allowed black people to move out the community. And a lot of the people that had the capability to move out, that's what they did. The Negroes that had the money and the upper middle class Negroes, they all abandoned the community. And they left these poor communities where there was black people who couldn't leave. And the black people who couldn't leave the community, they have dreams of getting out the hood, because they associate poverty with the hood. And when you associate poverty with the hood, what you're really doing, you're associating poverty with black people subconsciously. But what the subconscious does, it compiles the code and translate the code to exactly what it is, not the subjective aspects that we try to justify, or we say, okay, it's this and this and this and that. The subconscious mind identifies exactly what it is. Well, what the subconscious mind compiles and translate the code as black people equals poverty. So in order to alleviate and escape poverty, you must escape black people. Now, even the rich Negroes in their own communities, like you see the Uncle Ruckus on the Boondocks, he was against blacks, because that's the subconscious mind of black people in America, is to really escape black people. because we associate poverty with blacks, and we associate blacks with hood, but really it's just blacks like Africa. You know, they associate each other with poverty. You got rich Africans, you got poor Africans, you know, but a lot of them want to leave Africa to go to America because they associate poverty with Africa. You know, they don't see the opportunity to build an infrastructure and create. Like we probably got some cities there, but it should be more. Just like in America, the black community, we inherited an infrastructure. We don't know who built the infrastructure. We know we live in Chicago and we got all these massive buildings everywhere. We don't know how old the buildings are. They could be literally thousands of years old. It literally could be ancient Egypt. And this could be our ancestors' creations. We just don't know. But we don't even see the value of these houses we living in, the nicest houses in the world. The nicest buildings you could ever see anywhere on earth is in Chicago, right? And black people live in a lot of these buildings, particularly the West Side and Bronzeville and Kenwood, Hyde Park, stuff like that. They got the nicest looking buildings, but really Inglewood got nice buildings too. But I would say this, see, the black people, even though objectively the infrastructure is good, we see the community as being poor because it is a black community, and we allow the infrastructure to deteriorate, and we allow what we didn't create individually. Somebody else created the infrastructure. We abandoned that to go to somewhere else that's not black, and we see going somewhere else that's not black is as being elevated because we associate non-black people with not being poor. Now what happens is how the credit system in America is set up. Communities are judged based on the zip codes, and zip codes are judged based on the median income, the average income of the collective people in that community. So if all the high earning people move out the community, that drives the median income down for that community, and that drives the credit rating. So if you come through with that same zip code, you'll get less credit limits. You'll be refused of loans and grants and credits because of your zip code, because the median income is seen as high risk because it's low income communities. But the same Negroes that abandon the community, the high earning Negroes, they can move back into these communities. Now, if they move back to the communities, that will elevate the median income of the communities. And that will actually improve everybody's chances in that neighborhood of getting financing. Because for one, we don't really create credit unions or banks to finance each other, black people. So a lot of us are subjected to these Caucasian-owned, FDIC-insured banks to get financing. You know, and we can't really do it like we should be able to do it because the median income in our neighborhoods are very low. You know, you get when they put all this Section 8 housing in the community, and the average earner in the housing is with less than $500 a month, then that drives the median income down. And then the people who's not Section 8 or not low income, they still can't get nothing from these so-called white-owned banks. So it's like an endless trap. But the reason is the so-called black people can't really come together and invest in something as a group is because black people are trying to get away from each other. They'll go to a group full of anybody but blacks to invest in something because in our subconscious mind, we're trying to get away from blacks because black people equals poverty. Now, in order to build an infrastructure physically, you must have an infrastructure mentally, because our ancient ancestors, the Egyptians, also the Carthage, all of them, they believe that everything that is manifested physically also has to be manifested mentally and spiritually. First spiritually, second mentally, and then you could bring it into reality. It's similar to when you make a blueprint or a pre-production, what you call it, a storyboard. Like if you want to do an animation, you don't just jump into the computer and just animate. What you first do, you must draw a storyboard or an animatic, and then that's the mental aspect. But first, you got to actually have the inspiration and the thoughts. So you have to have so many different ideas in your mind already before you even create your storyboard. But that's the same thing for the infrastructure when you build these communities. And then you got to look at who's the audience to benefit from this animation, who will be interested in it, and that's going to determine how you do it, the language you use, the colors, whatever, like the colors of the people. If you want to be interested, if you want black people to be interested, you make the characters black. Basically, if you want the Chinese people to be interested, you make it Chinese. Or if you want a multitude of people interested in it, you got to put in a lot of different types of people in there, and that'll, you know, target your audience, because people usually look at things that has something to do with their own people. But when you create an infrastructure, you must first have a blueprint. For one, you must first have a group of people that's willing to actually utilize the infrastructure. Now, if you don't have anybody willing to purchase the houses or to even live in a community without killing each other, you ain't even gonna think about creating no blueprint for no buildings. You're gonna build a community in the middle of a slum. You think people finna come in? See, the people's minds have to be adjusted to want to be a community. And once you're a community and the people are like a community, I'm gonna define community. A community is a group of people who share the same interests and ideas and possibly the same background. Now you have the Jewish community. Now the Jewish community is one of the few communities who fits all of those descriptions. They have a unique history, culture, background, interest, right? And they live all over the world, but all over the world they're seen as one community regardless of their physical location. You have the so-called black community, who are by default part of it. You know, they just black. But really, black community is not really a community because they don't really share the same interests. They don't have the same desires. They don't really have a they haven't really determined the interests. What is our purpose? What is our future destination? And they don't even want to live with each other. Like you can't even they living with each other because, you know, racism, breadlining. So you're forced to live with it. It's like they just gonna somehow come together as a community and just manifest the community out of nowhere. This is like, they feel this is oppression, blacks being forced to be in the same neighborhood. So the black community is I put an asterisk over that. Then you got the basketball community, people that watch basketball, boxing community. Like a community could overlap. You know, people that's trade stocks. You see what I'm saying? So you got different types, the gaming community, and a lot of these communities have a lot of different types of nationalities and cultures of people in them because they share the same interests, and they do trade and business, and they meet up, and they willing to go and support members of that community. You know, you giving them money, you supporting their products, you buying the video games from Nintendo, Sony. You know, you got you know, news reporters. Like the communities are vast. But if you want to have a specific community, the so-called black community, they must also have a common interest, and they must be willing to coexist and support willingly. It got to be unforced, like that spiritually. And once you actually have a group of people who are willing to do business with each other and live with each other, then the infrastructure is going to be a demand for the infrastructure. We want better looking housing. We want more businesses. We need more money to make this thing successful. We need more qualified individuals, architects, scientists, artists. This is like, the need comes once the community is established. And the need is the infrastructure. We need water systems. Like say we want to build communities like how the Nation of Islam built a lot of communities because it was a need. People wanted to come together. They had a similar ideology. So they was able to build communities all over America. So say for instance, so-called blacks one day decided they was a community and they wanted to live with each other, but they wanted to build somewhere where there's nobody living. They could do that. They'll say, okay, we need water. Figure out how to get the water. We need electrical grids. We need to build the streets, the houses. We need everything that are to have a functional society. But since we already have all of that now, we have fully developed infrastructures all over America. We have Chicago, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, Houston. We have a place in California. We have places all over America that's already built that can be, I should say, enhanced or developed or maintained, whatever you want to say, improved. Yeah, improved. The infrastructure can be improved, but right as it speaks now, a lot of infrastructure is abandoned, and because the black people are abandoning it because they want to get away from each other, the gentrification happened. So other groups of people see the value in your infrastructure, and they see that you abandoned it. They come in, redevelop it, and then raise the prices on you. And you want to move back in after it's been gentrified when you could have stayed there and gentrified it yourself and improved it yourself. But the black community doesn't really exist because we in our subconscious mind, because we are computers, we translate the entire code as get away from blacks. Blacks equals poverty. And you're going to do this everywhere you go. Not even just in a so-called hood. Wherever you see a black person, you're going to think of poverty. It's going to be like that equals poverty. I can't support that. The products are not as valuable. The service is not good because he's black. That's what the so-called black people do. And I'm going to give an example. I thought of this earlier to prove how infrastructure must exist spiritually and mentally before it can exist physically, because everything must exist mentally and spiritually. Spiritually is like the unsaid motivation and inertia, with the will. First you get the will, the desire, and then you think the thoughts to translate that, and then you create a strategy in order to bring it into existence. It was a story in the Bible, in the book of 2 Samuel. Or was this Chronicles? I think it was Chronicles. First Chronicles. Now, King David was commissioned to build the temple of God, but the Most High told King David that his hands was too bloody. He killed too many people, so he wasn't going to be able to build it. But he was going to get the blueprint to build it. And when he got the blueprint, he was going to give it to King Solomon. And King Solomon was going to build the temple of God, right? So what happened was God gave David the blueprint, and then David drew it up. And King David gave the blueprint to Solomon. And then when Solomon became king and he was given the wisdom, he commissioned King Hiram to build the temple. Solomon didn't build it. He just passed the blueprint that David gave him to King Hiram from Tyre or Carthage, because the Carthaginians were the Phoenicians. So I'll just say the Carthaginian king Tyre, because Tyre was a city-state of Carthage. He was the one that built the temple of God. You know, he brought the materials, the cedars, the massive trees, and he did it. But the blueprint wasn't drawn up by Hiram or Solomon or David. It came spiritually. And then the mentality of it was they had the mindset to create it. And then once they had the mindset to create it, then they created it. It was inevitable. Once you got your mindset on something, it's really difficult not to get it done. But a lot of times we don't want to do it. We don't really comprehend why we don't want to do it, but our subconscious knows exactly why we don't want to do it. And we will not get the energy to do it. It would always come up short because we have pre-programmed ourselves not to do it. And we would compile this data in every situation when it comes to doing it. And doing it is working in a so-called community towards a so-called interest of the community, because the so-called blacks have been pre-programmed to get out the community, to get out the hood, really to get out of poverty. And we don't really associate poverty with the oppressive society, the oppressive group of people, the cause of the poverty. We blame the people that's in poverty for the poverty. And if we get away from the people that's in poverty, we'll get out of poverty. That's what the black people believe. And this is the reason that they don't really come together and work towards a common cause or invest as a group. That's about it.